What is syllogism? From the point of view of etymology, syllogisms comes from the Greek word syllogismus, which means an interference or a conclusion. According to Aristotle, syllogism is a propositional expression in which, for asserting things which have been laid down, something other than what has been laid down follows of necessity from being so. Therefore, it is a deductive argument consisting of two propositions that are being compared to create a logical conclusion drawn from the given propositions. That is why this syllogism is called as categorical syllogism. On the other hand, the other kind of syllogism is called hypothetical syllogism. Hypothetical comes from the Greek word hypos, which means below. Therefore, hypothetical syllogism is one wherein the major premise is a hypothetical proposition, and the minor premise as well as the conclusion is categorical proposition. There are three basic terms in using categorical syllogism. First is a major term which constitutes to a major premise, designated by the capital letter MP. It is the predicate of the conclusion and being represented by a capital letter P. Number 2, a minor term which constitutes to a minor premise, designated by a small letter MP. It is the subject of the conclusion and being represented by capital letter S. Number 3, a middle term which is found in the major premise and the minor premise, but never ever in the conclusion. A middle term is the subject of a major premise and the predicate of the minor premise. It is being represented by the capital letters M and T. MP but MP therefore, subject plus predicate, middle term plus predicate, subject plus middle term. For example, Peter is with Mary, but Joseph is with Peter. Therefore, Joseph is with Mary. Si Peter ito yung middle term. Si Mary is the predicate. Si Joseph is the subject, and the Peter is the middle term. Therefore, Joseph is with Mary. Joseph, siya yung subject. Si Mary, predicate. What are the fundamental rules for the validity of categorical syllogism? In order to pronounce the validity of categorical syllogism, it needs not the syllogism fallacious or erroneous. In these fundamental rules, they cover the entire structures of syllogism, from the number of terms to the quantities of the subject and the predicate terms to the qualities of the premises. If any of these fundamental rules is violated due to some of erroneous procedures, the whole syllogism is to be invalid and illicit. Following the same traditional presentation in other logic books, these 10 fundamental rules are divided fallacy according to number 1, extension of terms, number 2, according to quantity, and number 3, according to quality. Fallacies according to the extension of terms. First fundamental rules. Number 1, it is a must to have only 3 terms such as the subject, the predicate, and the middle term only. For example, Peter is with Mary, but Joseph is with Peter. Therefore, Joseph is with Mary. In this example, there are only 3 terms such as the Peter as the middle term, Mary as the predicate, and Joseph as the subject. Fallacious of 4th term or 5th term. For example, Peter is with Mary, but Joseph is with Peter and James. Therefore, Joseph is with Mary. In this example, there are 4 terms such as Peter, Mary, James, and Joseph. Fallacious of equivocation is totally erroneous if the term used to one arguments as the same word but different in meaning. For example, every plant is a factory. Is a good tea, a plant is G, but for health. Therefore, every factory is good for health. In this example, the term plant is used to equivocal in the conclusion. Second fundamental rules. The middle term must only be in the major premise as the middle in the minor premise as the predicate but not in the conclusion. For example, all Filipino are Asians, but Joshua is a Filipino. Therefore, Joshua is a Asian. Fallacious committed in the fundamental rules is the misplaced middle term. For example, all Filipino are Asian, but Joselito is a Asian. Therefore, Joselito is a Filipino. This example is erroneous because of the term of all Filipinos is used as the middle term. In a fundamental rule says that middle term must not be in the conclusion.
And now, let's proceed to the figures and moods of categorical syllogism. First let's discuss the term. Middle term, or symbolized as M, is the one who connects major and minor, while major term, or symbolized as P, is the predicate of conclusion. And lastly is the minor term, which symbolized as S, is the subject of conclusion. And next is the valid moods, which is A for affirmative universal proposition, E negative universal proposition, I is affirmative particular, and lastly is O negative particular proposition. Are the figures and valid moods of figure 1, figure 2, figure 3, and figure 4.
The minor premise must be affirmative to avoid an illicit major when the minor premise is made. In logical reasoning, an illicit major refers to a logical fallacy that occurs when the major term, the predicate of the conclusion, is distributed, refers to all members of a category in the conclusion but not in the major premise. This violates the rules of logical reference. To avoid the illicit major fallacy, the minor premise must be affirmative. An affirmative premise means that it asserts something positive about the subject. By having an affirmative minor premise, it ensures that the minor term is distributed in the conclusion. This allows for a valid logical inference because the conclusion can make a claim about all the instances of the minor terms based on the affirmative premise. This is example number 1 with an affirmative, minor affirmative must be affirmative. So, every professional is well respected, but some Balanga policemen are professionals. Therefore, some Balanga policemen are well respected. So, ang middle term, which stands of M that connects major and minor, is the professional. And major term that stands for P is predicate from conclusion, which is well respected. While the minor term that stands for S is a subject of conclusion. So, ang professional dito is siya yung nagko-connect sa balangga policeman and well-respected. Kasi middle term is nagko-connect siya sa major and minor. Professional is a middle and the well-respected is a major, while the minor term subject is the balangga policeman. Therefore, the example number 1 is valid. So, punta naman tayo sa example number 2 na invalid. Our province is agricultural land, but no Samal is a province. Therefore, no Samal is an agricultural land. So, paano nga ba natin nasabi na this is an invalid? The statement, therefore, no samal is an agricultural land is considered invalid because it does not follow the rules of logical reasoning. The original statement, our province is agricultural land does not provide any information about the province of Samal. Therefore, we cannot make a direct conclusion about the agricultural status of Samal based on the given conclusion. Number 2. The major premise must be universal, otherwise, violation of undistributed middle term will be committed. So, in logical reasoning, the undistributed middle term fallacy occurs when the middle term is not distributed in refers to all members of category in either premise. This violates the rules of logical inference. To avoid the undistributed middle term fallacy, the major premise must be universal. A universal premise means that it makes claims about all members of a category. By having a universal major premise, it ensures that the middle term is distributed in at least one premise. This allows for a valid logical inference because the conclusion can make claim about all the instances of middle term based on the universal premise. If the major premise is particular refers to only some members of a category, it does not distribute the middle term in either premise. This can lead to an undistributed middle term because the conclusion would be making a claim about all instances of the middle term without proper support from the premises. Therefore, to avoid the undistributed middle term fallacy, it is important to have a universal major premise in logical reasoning. Also, a valid modes in figure 1 and also AII and EIO. Here is one of the example of a valid major premise must be universal. Every Christian is a believer of God, but every Catholic is a Christian. Therefore, every Catholic is a believer of God. So, the Christian here is the middle term that connect major and minor. And the believer of God is major term, predicate of conclusion, and the Catholic is a subject of conclusion. So this is valid because Christian connects the major and minor, and this is a well distributed, hindi siya undistributed. So punta naman tayo sa isang invalid, which is the conclusion is undistributed. Some animals are tameable, but all mammals are animals. Therefore, some mammals are tameable. So, paano naging invalid to? The statement some animals are tameable, but all mammals are animals. Therefore, some mammals are tameable is considered invalid because it does not follow the rules of logical reasoning. The original statement some animals are tameable does not provide any specific information about mammals being tameable. It only states that there are some mammals that can be tamed. The second statement, all mammals are animals, is a true statement. However, it does not provide any information about the tameability of mammals. To make a conclusion, we would need specific information or evidence about the tameability of mammals. So this example is an invalid because this is undistributed. So hindi natin mapapatunayan lahat ng animals are some mammals are tammable. We don't know if all the mammals is tammable. So this example is undistributed and also invalid. So ang valid modes for figure 1 subbre is AAA, which is daraga. This are some of the examples. Every free man is considerate, but all adults are free men. Therefore, all adults are responsible for their acts. So the first stance is all the stance is AAAA, which means it's an affirmative universal proposition. And here are valid modes. Rules for figure 2 pre. One premise must be negative to avoid the fallacy of undistributed middle term. Fallacy of the undistributed middle term is a formal fallacy committed in a standard form syllogism whenever the term appearing in both premises is undistributed. Each of the middle terms refers to some but not all the individuals in the premises is statement. So I'm gonna give you one of the example of valid undistributed middle term. All physicians are doctors, but Joe is not a doctor. Therefore, Joe is not a physician. The argument here is invalid. This is a valid modes EAE. So here, the breakdown of the argument. Premise 1. All physicians are doctors. This is an universal affirmative. Premise 2. Joe is not a doctor. This is an particular negative. Conclusion. Therefore, Joe is not a physician. This is a particular negative. In this argument, the middle term doctor is distributed in both premise, in the universal affirmative premise and the particular negative premise. This ensures that the middle term is distributed at least once, which is necessary to avoid the fallacy of undistributed middle. The conclusion logically follows from the premises as it is consistent with the information provided. Therefore, the argument is valid. Kasi meron siya sa valid mode for figure 2, which is EAE. So, punta naman tayo sa isang example. All men are mortal, but dogs are mortal. Therefore, all dogs are men. This is an invalid. Here's the breakdown of the argument. Premise 1. All men are mortal. This is an universal affirmative. Premise 2. But dogs are mortal. Universal affirmative. Conclusion. Therefore, all dogs are men. Universal affirmative. The middle term in this argument is mortal. However, it is not distributed in either premise. In premise 1, man is the subject, and in premise 2, dog is the subject. Since the middle term is not distributed in either premise, it is undistributed. The conclusion all dogs are men does not logically follow from the premises because there is no direct connection between the term dogs and men in the premises. Therefore, the argument is invalid. So, this is not invalid kasi wala siya sa valid modes for figure 2. Number 2 in special rules for figure 2 prepre. So, number 2 is the major premise must be universal, otherwise violation of illicit major will be committed. So, in logical reasoning, the illicit major term fallacy occurs when the major term that predicate of the conclusion is distributed, refers to all members of a category in the conclusion, but not in the major premise. This violates the rules of logical inference. To avoid the illicit major term fallacy, the major premise, the premise that contains the major term, must be universal. A universal premise makes a claim about all members of category. By having a universal major premise, it ensures that the major term is distributed in the major premise. This allows for a valid logical inference because the conclusion can make a claim about all the instances of the major term based on the universal premise. If the major premise is particular, refers to only some members of a category, it does not distribute the major term in the major premise. This can lead to an illicit major term fallacy because the conclusion would be making a claim about all the instances of the major term without proper support from the premises. Here is one of the example of number 2. All books are reading materials, but TV is not a reading material. Therefore, TV is not a book. This is a valid. Kasi meron siya sa valid modes for figure 2 prepre, which is A, E, E. So, this is also a valid deductive argument form that states if A then B, not B. Therefore, not A. In this premises are all books are reading materials. TV is not a reading material. From these premises, we can infer the conclusion. Therefore, TV is not a book. The conclusion logically follows from the premises, and the argument is valid. It is demonstrate that if something is not reading material, then it cannot be a book based on the given premises. So, here is one of the second example of number 2 in figure 2 prepre. Some Filipinos are American citizens, but no Japanese is an American citizen. Thus, no Japanese is a Filipino. So, this premises is invalid kasi wala siya sa valid modes for figure 2, which is the prepre. So, this is the explanation of example. So, the premises are some Filipinos are American citizens and no Japanese is an American citizen. From these premises, the conclusion states thus no Japanese is a Filipino. However, the conclusion cannot be logically derived from the premises. The premises only provide information about the relationship between Filipinos and American citizens, as well as the relationship between Japanese people and American citizenship. It does not provide any direct information about the relationship between Japanese people and Filipinos. Therefore, the argument is invalid because the conclusion goes beyond what can be logically inferred from the given premises.
And next is the figure 3, which is the subjective. The minor premises must be affirmative to avoid the fallacy of illicit major. Number 2 is the conclusion must be particular. If not, the violation of this rule give rise to fallacy of illicit minor. For example, some endangered species are protected, but all endangered species are animals. Therefore, some animals are protected. Ito is valid siya kasi ang valid modes niya is I. So, yung I is affirmative particular, which is yung some, A is affirmative universal which is yung all, and I ulit is a affirmative particular which is yung sum. So, valid siya. Sa next example naman is all martyrs are saint, but no martyr is coward. Therefore, no coward is saints. So, yung all niya dito is affirmative universal which is yung A. But no, yung no niya dito is E. Therefore, no is E ulit. Pero yung valid moods na A, E, E is wala siya sa pagpipilian ng valid moods ng figure 3. So, invalid siya. Another example of figure 3 is some congressmen are not famous, but all congressmen are rich. Therefore, some rich men are not famous. Ito is valid siya kasi ang valid mood niya is I din, which is yung I is affirmative particular, which is yung sum. Yung A is affirmative universal, which is yung all. And last is the I, which is affirmative particular, which is yung sum. Kaya yung valid moods niya is I. So, meron siya sa valid moods of figure 3. So, magiging valid lang ang figure 3 pag ang valid moods niya is AAI, IAI, or AII, EAO, OAO, or EIO. Another example of invalid in figure 3. Every strong typhoon is disastrous, but all strong typhoons are natural occurrences. Therefore, all natural occurrences are disastrous. So, yung every dito is undistributed term siya. Yung all naman is affirmative universal. And the last sentence is, yung all din is affirmative universal din siya, which is invalid siya kasi pag titignan mo siya sa valid moods of figure 3 is wala yung undistributed term and the AAA. And last figure, which is the figure 4 or the predicate subject. Number 1 is if the major premise is affirmative, the minor premise must be universal to ensure the avoidance of the fallacy of the undistributed middle term. Number 2 is, if the minor premise is affirmative, the conclusion must be particular. Otherwise, violation of illicit minor term will be committed. These are the examples. All Mangyans are natives, but some natives are Filipinos. Therefore, some Filipinos are Mangyans. So, invalid siya kasi ang valid moods niya is AII, which is, yung A is affirmative universal, yung all. Yung sum naman sa second sentence is affirmative particular, and same din siya sa last sentences is sum din siya, so AII. So yung AII, pag pupunta tayo sa valid moods of figure 4, wala siyang AII doon. So it's a invalid. So another example is all movies are innovative, but all which are innovative are profitable things. Therefore, some profitable things are movies. So, valid siya kasi ang valid moods niya is A, and I. So, pag pupunta ka sa valid moods of figure 4, meron siyang I doon. So, valid siya. In order to memorize the valid moods and figures, some philosophers have developed a system of remembering by using the 3 vowels corresponding to the valid kinds of syllogistic inferences, and it comes with the words puzzled by the authors. These are the following. Figure 1 is Daraga, which is the AAA. Peace is for the EAE. Radi for the AII. Memio for the EIO. And figure 2 is the peace or the EAE, falir for the AEE, stereo for the IEO, and last is the tabo, which is the AOO. In figure 3 naman is Makati, which is AAI, Misamis, which is IAI, Halili, which is AII, Regalo, which is AEO, Tomato, which is OAO, and last is Erickson, which is EIO. And last figure is figure 4, which is kapatid, which is AAI, kabebe, which is AEE, silahis, which is IAI, and lepanto, which is AEO, and last is negrito, which is EIO. So, need lang natin i-memorize tong mga word puzzles by the authors para mas madali nating makita kung yung valid moods ba sa figure 1 is valid or invalid. And ganun din sa other figures.
Good day, everyone. I am Jessica Balinon, and I will be presenting hypothetical syllogism. What is a hypothetical syllogism? Hypothetical syllogism are short, two premise deductive arguments in which at least one of the premise is a conditional and antecedent or consequent of which also appears in the other premise. There are two types of hypothetical syllogism, the antecedent and the consequent. The antecedent comes from the Latin word antecedo, which means something that goes before. The antecedent is the first part of logical proposition in which precedes the consequent or the conclusion of the proposition. In the standard logical form, if P the Q, the P serves as the antecedent while na Q serves as the consequent. For example, in the sentence, if Socrates is a man, then Socrates is immortal. State the antecedent in the statement is the if Socrates is a man. Hypothetically, it means in this antecedent, next, consequent comes from the Latin word consequere, which means something that goes after. Consequence is the second half of hypothetical proposition. Here are examples. If armed force of the Philippines are soldiers, then they are combatants. But armed force of the Philippines are soldiers, therefore they are combatants. Next, there are three kinds of hypothetical proposition. These are the conditional syllogism, the disjunctive syllogism, and the conjunctive syllogism. In in conditional syllogism, in order to comprehend this, it needs to mention the antecedent and the consequence as the two main composition of hypothetical syllogism. In this concept, it relates also the principles of cause and effect. These two main compositions are for the truth of hypothetical judgment that lies in the truth of independence between the two clauses, the antecedent, which is the cause, and the consequence, which is the effect. For example, if you are handsome, then you have admirers. You are handsome, you have admirers. Dito sa example na to, yung antecedent dito is if you if you are handsome, tapos yung consequent naman is then you have admirers. Next naman is there are two fundamental processes governing the validity of conditional syllogism. These are the positing mode and yung sublating mode. Dito sa positing mode, which means that the minor premise or the antecedents make influences assertively on their respective conclusion or the consequence. Therefore, if the antecedent is true and sequence is valid, then consequent is true. Dito sa positing mode na ito, na kapag ang antecedent antecedent and consequent ay hindi. Kapag ang antecedent is tama at ang sequence niya ay valid, then yung consequence niya ay tama. Next is sublating mood, which means that the process of expressing arguments, denying or asserting the premise to be false. Therefore, if the the consequent is true and the sequence is valid, then the antecedent is also false. Ito naman sa sublating mode, kapag yung sequence ay valid, pero yung consequent is mali, mali. Then, yung antecedent naman is mali. Next kinds of hypothetical syllogism is disjunctive syllogism. It's a syllogism whose major premise is a conjunctive preposition, while its major premise and conclusion are categorical proposition. It needs to use the connective in English grammar, such as either or, whether in assertive or denial arguments. It is therefore a hypothetical syllogism whose major premise is a disjunctive proposition, whose minor premise assert one or more members of major premise and whose conclusion denies the other member. There are two processes of disjunctive syllogism, the strict disjunctive and the extensive disjunctive. Dito sa strict disjunctive, it is a process of disjunctive syllogism wherein one part of or member is truly only and other denotes falsity. Dito sa strict disjunctive, if one disjunctive is the firm, then one must be denied. And if one is denied, then one must be affirmed. For example, Albert Einstein is either a musician or scientist, but he is scientist, therefore he is not musician. Next is extensive disjunctive is a process of syllogism wherein at least one part of the members is true. In this syllogism, it denotes parts that contradict each other. Example, this color is either ebony or ivory, but it is ebony, therefore it is not ivory. Next, last kinds of hypothetical syllogism is the conjunctive syllogism. Dito sa conjunctive syllogism, only one of the components can be true, but both can be false. Hence, one is affirmed. It is necessarily entailed that one must be denied, but if one is denied, it does not necessarily entail that one must be affirmed, for both of them can be denied without contradiction. Dito sa conjunctive syllogism na to ay gumagamit ito ng and. It is therefore that the major premise denies that two choices can be true at the same time. The minor premise and conclusion are both categorical proposition. For example, I cannot serve God and Satan simultaneously, but I serve God, therefore I cannot serve Satan. Spatial variations of syllogism are basically founded in categorical and hypothetical syllogism. Even if whether categorical or hypothetical syllogism, with the major premise as the first premise, the minor premise as second premise, and the definition as the conclusion. This special variation of syllogism does not need and it does not follow the pattern like the categorical, even if hypothetical syllogism, due to fact that they do not have the standard form. Here are 5 special variations of syllogism. First is the antimeme, comes from the Greek word en, which means in, and thumos means mind. Etymologically speaking, it means in mind. It is a kind of syllogism wherein either a premise or the conclusion is totally omitted. This antimeme syllogism is classified according to order. First order antimeme is dito na natatanggal yung major premise. For example, every singer is an artist, but John Dewey is a singer. Yung minor premise niya dito is John Dewey is a singer. Therefore, John Dewey is an artist. Tapos yung conclusion naman is, therefore, Dewey is an artist. Sa second order naman is dito na natatanggal yung minor premises. Then sa third naman is dito na din natatanggal yung conclusion. Empireme, syllogism is a second variation of syllogism which comes from the Greek word epi, which means on, and chair, which means hand. Epistemological speaking, it means on hand. It is therefore in which one or both premises are supported by explanation which indicate in a proposition in order to validate the truth of the given proposition. There are two kinds of empireme syllogism, the simple and compound. This is hence which is being needed to use the connective clauses like since, for, because, or etc. Sample of simple empireme syllogism. Men are rational because they are all capable of thinking. But John Angelo is a man, therefore John Angelo is rational. Sa compound naman is men are rational because they are capable of thinking, but John Angelo is a man for he has human nature, therefore Angelo is rational. Next is sorites. Sorites is also one of the special variation of syllogism where the conclusion is between the connected syllogism are concealed in order to have one main conclusion only. There are two types of sorites, the Aristotelian sorites and the Godenian sorites. Aristotelian sorite is one type of sorite wherein the predicate of the first proposition becomes the subject, the second proposition becomes the subject of the next in order to main conclusion is formed. For example, all philosophers are thinkers, but all thinkers are lovers of wisdom, but all lovers of wisdom are intelligent persons. But all intelligent persons are responsible individuals, therefore all philosophers are responsible individuals. Dito sa proposition na um, dito sa example na to, the all philosopher are thinkers ay nagiging subject ng second proposition. Tapos yung second proposition naman, nagiging subject dito sa third proposition, then so on. At, at dito na nabubuo yung main occlusion na all philosophers are responsible individuals. Next is Godinian's right. It's one of the types of sorites wherein the subject of first proposition becomes the predicate of the subject proposition becomes the predicate of the next until the conclusion is formed. Therefore, the subject is the subject of the last proposition and the predicate is the predicate of the first syllogism. For example, all philosophers are thinkers, but all thinkers are lovers of wisdom, but all intelligent persons are thinkers, but all responsible individuals are intelligent persons. Therefore, or all responsible individuals are thinkers. Last special variation of syllogism is the dilemma, which comes from the Greek word this, which means twice, and lemma, which means premise. Etymological speaking, it means twice premise. It is therefore an argument in which the major premise consists of this disjunctive proposition and the minor proposition consists of conditional proposition. The lemma can either be simple form or complex. For single form dilemma is a form wherein the conclusion is categorical proposition. For example, the armed force of the Philippines must either attack or not the Abu Sayyaf troop. If the Abusayyaf troop will be attacked by the AFP, then the lives of the hostage will be endangered. If the AFP will not attack the Abu Sayyaf troop, then they will continue to hold the hostage and endanger their life. Therefore, in both cases, the lives of hostage will be endangered. Sa complex form dilemma naman is wherein conclusion is disjunctive preposition offering alternatives. For example, in gambling, either I will or not. If I gamble and win, I will gain money. If I gamble and I will not win, I will not gain money at all. Therefore, either I will win or not, I have to gamble. That's all. Thank you.